I don't know what to do with $25 million. I woke up the next morning and I had all these emails from all these incredible women that were like in these leadership roles. And I was like, oh my God, panic.
It helps to move forward. It's incredibly difficult to do that, but it really helps.
If I was talking to my user in a coffee shop, like what would they want to hear? What would they be looking for? I tell people a lot, as sort of scary as it is like, if you died in the next 2-3 years, like what would people say at your funeral?
It reminded me about some of my personal experience that I have never shared as well. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Growth Mates. This is Kate Syuma, and this is a new season of this podcast in the company of women, where we celebrate women leaders and discuss their career, how they transformed, how they grow companies, communities, and many, many other things. I have flowers just next to me to celebrate the theme of this season and the upcoming spring. And I think when this episode will roll out, we will be already in the middle of spring season, finally. Yeah.
Can't wait.
And today I have a fantastic guest. I've been looking forward to talk to you, Mallory. And before we start, just welcome to Growth Mates, finally.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here as well.
Awesome. And by the way, if you're listening to this show already and have been following it, please share anything you want. Any good review on the platform that you're following this show is very valuable. And on that note, I'm happy to introduce Mallory Contois. I just asked how to pronounce the surname, and it's a French Canadian, which is amazing. And a couple of things I've already known about you before, recording that episode. And I've been surprised how many companies you already worked in. I will not be able to count all of them, but it's LinkedIn, the tool that I'm using every day. It's Pinterest, the tool that I was using very actively when it was on top. You were also investing in some of very well-known VCs like Axel, like the First Round Capital. You were course creator on Reforge. I've passed probably 7 courses there. And now you're creating your new course on Maven, where I'm also a creator, by the way. And you're now a head of community and Mercury race. And you also have your own community, which is... at that point, I cannot imagine how you're combining all of these things. Probably you can tell us about you in a better way than I did. Anything I missed, which I would be surprised if I missed something.
You did actually miss a couple of big ones. I was at Compass as well, and then Cameo during COVID when we had our big tailwinds there. So yeah, I am an addict to the early stages of, and I've been a pretty good picker up until now, which has been fun.
Amazing. Wow. I don't know. At this point, probably your career seems like a huge run for someone who just opened your profile and looked through the history. And just to start and to understand better your story, how did you look at growing your career at different chapters of your life? Probably we will not get too far away to the kindergarten stage, but wherever you prefer, let's get back in time and talk about your career transformations and what had an impact on them.
Yeah, I love this subject because I feel very passionately about it, and you'll probably see why. So I grew up in a place called Farmington, Connecticut. It's right outside of Hartford County. Very sort of a lot of doctors, lawyers, insurance, very traditional career paths are most common there. It's not a very diverse area. And so I grew up seeing sort of one version of success. And, of those options, I thought doctor sounded the most interesting. And I was always very good at science and math. And so that kind of became the path, the only path that seemed like a viable path or an interesting path to me. And so I went to Duke primarily as a pre-med student because I wanted to become a doctor. My dad's a doctor. My mom is a retired nurse. And I got there and suddenly was dropped into, now Duke is not the picture of diversity, but certainly a more diverse space than I had grown up in. And I was not only exposed to a more diverse group of people, but, diverse sets of interests and courses and like areas of study and things like that. And I ended up taking a couple of courses on psychology while I was there and just like felt like I was learning so much, like so much made sense to me as I was learning about these things. And I felt just so much more passionate about understanding how humans worked than becoming a doctor. And so I dropped pre-med my second year and still stayed on kind of like the science and math side of psychology, did a lot of research, things like that, but really started to explore kind of like all these other possible things and career paths and stuff like that. And so I'm very grateful that I had that moment, but I still didn't even, I mean, it was also the age of the internet when computer science was like pretty new, and I'm aging myself here, but like these big tech companies were just starting to become a viable career path for people that were going to schools like Duke. We were very consulting and investment banking heavy in terms of where students went. And none of that really spoke to me. And so when I graduated sort of without a plan, but I knew I wanted to move to New York. I knew I wanted to sort of work in entrepreneurship and tech and like this field that was kind of unfurling at the time. And a friend of mine was working at an ad tech company who, he knew I was smart and we sang a cappella together. And that was pretty much the only like my only qualifications, but they needed an operations person. He was like, come interview, whatever. And so I sort of fell into ad tech in 2012. Well, even before that with an internship in 2011. But it was at the time when programmatic ad buys were just sort of becoming the new norm, and that technology was really being developed, and that whole sort of like explosion of spend and stuff like that. So I kind of fell into that world, or was invited into that world, and loved it. And then like kind of started to feel these tensions of the things I was really enjoying and the things that I was not enjoying as much. Your first job is always a little weird because you're like in the adult world for the first time. And, we were a Series B tech company in 2012. And like that was inevitably strange as well. It was a weird time. There was like our CEO was scooting around the office on a Bluetooth headset. Like it was like out of a TV show, But anyway, I followed a leader there to LinkedIn who I just really loved working for. Her name was Corrine Roman. Shout out Corrine if you're listening to this. But she was leading a team at LinkedIn, and I had just absolutely loved working for her. So I sort of followed my gut there, and I already was starting to get the comments from my parents and like other people being like, you can't like start job hopping. You have to show loyalty. Like you have to stay in one place. And I was like, I don't know. It doesn't really seem like anybody cares. I'm going to go do this thing that like seems more interesting. And so I was at this bigger tech company. LinkedIn by 2013 was sizable, and but there were only 60 of us in New York. So it still felt quite small. The majority of the company was still in Sunnyvale. And, I really got a taste for like the heyday of big tech when we had all the amazing food and snacks and like smart people. And I was working on things that were interesting, and like using my psychology degree, really thinking about how I was on the ads team and thinking about how we were reaching people in like in a curated way and like finding the right people on the internet for the things that we were trying to get to them. And that was just fascinating to me. And I fell in love with kind of that like mix of human oriented technology and like thinking about how tech really interacts with people's brains and emotions and like how it can be a positive resource. Because working at LinkedIn and ads, we were actually doing ads for roles and job opportunities, and like people were finding new jobs, and it was cool. It was really fun.
If you didn't know, in addition to making this show, I'm also helping other companies grow meaningful products as an advisor and a founder of GrowthMates. And now I'm also launching a new course, User-Centric Product-Led Growth. My whole career, I've been balancing between business goals and user needs. And one truth that I found, What is good for user is also good for a business. I collected all the best practices I learned for over 6 years working on product growth at Miro, interviewing more than 20 industry leaders on this podcast, and preparing proven practices that drove real impact. In this 3-week intensive, we are going to turn your real challenge into a growth roadmap, from quick wins to big bets. And I will be there for you to provide my feedback in live sessions. The course starts already on 24th of March, and for dear listeners, I want to share a discount of $100 with the promo code GrowthMates. I would like to interact with each one directly, and this is why it will be a small group of only 20 seats. The link will be in the episode description, and I would appreciate if you can share it with someone who might find it useful. Hope to see you on the course. And the last announcement. This podcast has a friendly partner, Amplitude, the best tool that can help you get insights you need to drive growth. I've been on the lookout for great examples of thoughtful user guidance, which, to be honest, was not easy to find. But recently, I came across something interesting that Amplitude introduced, their new guides and surveys. Instead of throwing pop-ups at every user, it sends the right message at the right time. Imagine if you're exploring a new feature, it doesn't jump in immediately. It nudges you only when needed. If feedback is requested, it happens right after a meaningful action, not in the middle of something important. If you'd like to influence user behavior in a positive way while respecting each user, check out Amplitude Guides and Surveys, and the link is in description. I'm happy to hear that you brought your passion in psychology to the job, to the field that sounds like unconventional to bring this into ad sphere, but why not? I think it's beautiful. And I know that even these days, you're still like very psychology first in your content, in your course at Reforge. So it seems like it's something like a component that you're taking with you over and over into other chapters. And I'm wondering, probably the biggest chapter happened in Pinterest. How many years you've spent there?
Yeah, I was there for almost 5 years.
Wow.
I was in the first 100 employees there. So I started pre-revenue before we were making any money, and which is like hard to imagine. And, there was a small team of us that were working on launching the first ads. And it was such a special experience being there. I feel like I grew up there. I did 45 different jobs while I was there. I scaled across, many teams, hired many people. The teams changed. Our focus changed. It was really awesome. And I think that's where I really credit my time at Pinterest for allowing myself to become a generalist and develop a number of different skills. I started there on kind of like the data visualization, business insights, campaign management type of side of things. But then over time, I was managing big accounts there. I got the opportunity to help actually build out the server and think about targeting and different ad formats. And I worked on product, and I was part of starting the product ops team, and just really special to have touched so many different pieces of a business that is so widely used. And Pinterest was,
I can imagine.
Oh yeah, it was incredible. And I love talking about it still. It's still my baby.
I know, probably a similarity here is I've spent 6 years at Miro also, very, very early stage when the company was 50 people. Probably joined Pinterest when it was around that size or even smaller.
Yeah, about 100.
And it feels probably pretty hard to leave when it's time to leave. Can you recall that moment and maybe unpack what guided you through other chapters? What maybe happened in your life that made an impact on how you changed the perspective of how you look at the next job and the next job after the next job?
Yeah, it was an identity crisis for sure. So while I was at Pinterest, I was there for almost 5 years. Right in the middle, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I had cancer while I was at Pinterest, and that resulted in me having to take about 6 months off. And anyone who has gone through chemo, it really affects your brain. It affects how you think. It affects your ability to even get work done, things like that. And the team at Pinterest was just incredible. They really took care of me. They really like supported me. The teams showed up and like really, I don't know if I've ever told this story. They made me a Pinterest board with like all these people at Pinterest that wrote in all their favorite movies and TV shows and stuff. And like, that was really, really special. And they just made everything as easy as they could for me. And that went down to also when I came back from treatment, my data brain wasn't quite there yet. But I was always a pretty funny person. So they put me on the sales team because they were like, here's a thing you can do still and like reintegrate and things like that. And that actually led to me leading one of our biggest accounts for a while, because bringing my product sense into account management and working with these like really, CMOs of big companies ended up being a really nice fit for a while. And it allowed me to develop that skill set. Whereas previously I'd been very internal. And I attribute a lot of my sort of confidence and my ability to work externally at companies to that time. So it was just really incredible. And yeah, we got to the point where we were 2,500 employees, $1 billion ARR business, and like it was suddenly just a totally different world. It was like I had blinked and I was looking around and I was like, oh my God, I don't know anybody here anymore. And like, we're sort of doing the same thing. Like, we know what this is going to be now. Like, for so long, we didn't know what Pinterest was going to be. It was like a ton of trial and error and experimentation and reading how like our audience was reacting to things we were building and pivoting and changing. And then at some point when a business gets that large, you know what it's going to be. Like, you can't pivot and change, And so I learned that is the point at which I'm sort of like, okay, my time is done. Like I love handing things off to people that love stability, but I just don't get excited about super stable businesses. I like the chaos and I like to be building and changing. And so I think that's the thing I learned there. But the first time you go through that, you're like, oh my God, I can't leave. Like, where am I going to go? Like, who am I outside of a Pinterest employee? Like, this is where I've grown up. And so that decision was really, really hard. The only thing that made it easier was that
first of all, I can't probably imagine enough how traumatic, how it all impacted the living part, but also being in that moment. First of all, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being vulnerable. Not so many folks can do that. And
I'm an open book.
I also see how your positive mindset probably like just, live through that part moving forward. You didn't stop a lot on that situation. You started talking about how things were moving forward. I do sort of blow
through it. Sorry.
It's okay, but it also shows how probably your mindset helped you overcome this experience, how you were able to get out of that, but also probably strengthened your stickiness, if I can say something like that, to your team, because it supported you. And how in relationships, if we pass through more difficult moments, we're getting closer and closer. Same thing with companies. If we pass through, difficult stuff, it can become very hard to leave. But looking back probably at this situation that you had cancer, very, very sorry to hear that at a young age, successfully passed through that. Like, how now you look at probably all things today, like, did your perspective change about the work, the life, the career choices because of that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's no way you don't change going through that. Today, I very much feel overwhelming kind of gratitude for having gone through it, which may sound bizarre. I would not wish it on anyone at all. And a lot of what I try to do is share what I learned so that people can learn it without having to go through that experience, because it's not fun and it's very scary, inevitably. And I had a very aggressive cancer. Like, the news was not good when I got it. And the thing that you learn, I think, is not like, I feel like the most common thing I read of people being like, oh, you learn not to sweat the small stuff. Like, I think people say that a lot about having gone through something like that. And I still sweat the small stuff. Like, I don't know. I don't actually identify with that takeaway very much. I think it made me actually care a lot more about more things. I think I take my time here alive very seriously now. I'm not sure I did before that. I think you assume that you've just got decades and decades and decades to have experiences and to impact others and to leave a mark and to build things. And, you just think you have so long. And then, 25 is a really wild age to go through something like that, because it's sort of, if anyone listening can put yourself back in your 25-year-old brain, you're sort of just figuring out, like, you're still just going through a lot of the motions, right? Of figuring out how to be an adult. And you're not thinking a lot about other people. You're not like creating a ton of impact. And the idea of dying at that age without having created anything, or without having like really not made my mark, but like positively impacting other people, was terrifying to me. And so like I tell people a lot, as sort of scary as it is like, if you died in the next 2-3 years, like what would people say at your funeral? And that is what you think about when something like that happens. And that can be a very real situation for anybody at any point. And so that is a little bit of the filter that I run my life through and my decisions through, of like, is this way that I'm allocating my time and my emotions and my effort and my skills and my passion and whatever it is this going to result in something that I'm going to be proud of and feel was a really like good, impactful use of my time while I had it? Because I can get sick again. I'm much more susceptible to other types of cancers, as well as recurrence of my own. And so there is a reality of like, I may not live as long as everybody else, or I may get sick again next year. And there's a lot of therapy that has been done around dealing with that concept. But it can be this really beautiful thing where it's very easy for me to say no to things now. It's very easy. I have this very clear filter where I don't stay in a situation that's not good for me or good for people around me. I don't sort of like, if I'm going to fail, I fail quickly and like move on, because I don't have time, like I don't have time to dwell and be sad and, whatever. And so I think it has shaped a lot of my urgency. It's shaped a lot of why you see my career has been kind of quick since then, where it's like, all right, I go, I build something, I hand it off. I go, I build something, I hand it off. And, I think it's been a really beautiful, like if I did get sick again tomorrow, I'd be very proud of what I've done. So that's a really awesome thing to be able to say now.
That's a very strong story. That's a very moving story. And it reminded me about some of my personal experience that I have never shared as well, that when I was 22, my dad passed away from cancer, and I was at Mira Hypergrowth, the growing part of my personal career. And to come or to overcome through that traumatic journey, I actually concentrated very much on work, which had an impact also on this hyper growth in my career. And people sometimes are asking me how you could grow in 7 titles in one company in 6 years. And I'm usually telling them these logical steps, how it happened. I have never told them about that, but probably sometimes it helps to create something. It helps to move forward. It's incredibly difficult to do that, but it really helps. And what you've mentioned about the sense of urgency or sense of momentum and doing what you can at the current moment leads me to my next question, actually, about creating your community. And I don't know if it's connected or not to your experience.
It's all connected.
People who are creating something, especially after such an experience, creating that for a reason. And I'm very curious to hear, how did you come up with this first concept of your community, the Old Girls Club? And is there anything behind that name, which I'm now like, I have some assumptions, but I really don't know. Just tell about this.
Yeah. So fast forward a few years from where we just were with me leaving Pinterest. And, I went on to GM a business, to chief of staff another business. I'd sort of been in that like right hand to the founder position for quite a while, 5-6 years at this point after Pinterest. And I was the CEO of a gaming company called Medify with Josh Fabian, who's the CEO, who just officiated my wedding. He's the best. And he was just an absolute joy to work for and with. And so we had just raised our Series A in December of 2021. And it was a big series. It was a 2021 Series A. It was a big Series A when money was a little bit easier to come by. And, we closed on Thanksgiving, like the funds transferred on Thanksgiving. And then I went home to my parents' house in Connecticut. And you know how around the holidays, you're kind of in that weird, like you're a little drunk, you've eaten a lot of cheese, you're like thinking about life and feeling weird that you're at your parents' house. That's kind of like the mindset that I was in here. And I just remember feeling this overwhelming sense of like loneliness and pressure and like being like, what am I doing? Like, I don't know what to do with $25 million. Like, I don't know how to do this. This is so much money. Like, and I felt like I didn't know who to tell that I didn't know what to do. Like I had inklings of what I was supposed to do, but like, I didn't know if I was doing anything right. And it really just struck me how few women I had as peers that would have the context and like I would be able to be sort of vulnerable with, because Josh, if you're listening to this, there was no way I was going to Josh at the time to be like, I don't know what to do, because he could fire me. And I never found that I was as comfortable sort of expressing doubt in myself or my abilities or asking questions with men in leadership positions. But I always had found that women in leadership positions were a little bit easier for me to have those conversations with, mostly because we just had a little bit more life experience in common. And so I was like, man, I wish I had a group of like senior women that I could just go and like ask how to build a big P&L like this, or, whatever it is. And so I did rage post on LinkedIn after a couple of glasses of wine at my parents' house. And I wrote a post that was like, it's not fair that women always are expected to know all the answers. And like, you can find it on my LinkedIn. It was actually a pretty eloquent post, if I do say so myself. But I did have the wherewithal to be like, if you feel this way too, here's a type form. I don't know what I was thinking was going to happen. I certainly had no intention of like starting a business or anything. I was just lonely and scared. And so I kind of put out like a bat call. What is it? Bat signal. I put out the bat signal and I was like, hey, like if anybody else has gone through this, like I would love to just, maybe we can all pool into like a Slack place and like help each other if anybody's struggling. Like I thought it was going to be kind of like we'll hang out for a month or two and then move on with our lives. Maybe make some friendships along the way. But it really resonated like way more than I thought it was going to. And the thing about coming up in the VC-backed tech industry is product market fit when you see it. And it's very hard to ignore. And so, I woke up the next morning and I had all these emails from all these incredible women that were like in these leadership roles. And I was like, oh my God, panic. Like, who am I? Like, who am I to do anything with this? And my boyfriend at the time of like a couple of months, now husband, I called him and I was like, I messed up. Like I did this wild thing and I need to tell all these people to go away. Like, I don't know. I don't have time, And he was like, I'll never forget it. He said, what's the worst thing that can happen if you explore like supporting these people? Like what they're going to say, oh, that Mallory, like she tried to help, like. And I was like, the worst thing that could happen is that they have a bad user experience. And he was like, you're crazy. Like, chill out. It's just a bunch of people that want to talk to each other. And the process of like just dumping all these people into like a pretty well organized Slack channel, because I did care about the user experience regardless. And seeing all these people who like had all these shared experiences and suddenly everybody was like, oh my God, like this is awesome. I can talk about the things that like I'm struggling with and it doesn't matter where I live. And remember, it's 2021. So Zoom is still like new. And this idea of like collaborating virtually and across the country is sort of new.
I think you've been on the point that you collected these people, opened the doors to your Slack community, and then probably some magic happened, because looking back, looking at stats, looking that you had like almost 2,000 paying members or something like that, what happened? What led to that actually business? Because it wasn't the business, it was an idea, and probably everybody who is listening wants to drink a couple of glasses of wine before the next post on LinkedIn to have
highly encourage it.
To have a similar impact.
No, I know.
Right?
It sounds like a dream, right? It's like, it's too good to be true that it happened this way. And I feel very lucky, but I also don't think it was like, like I got so, it was a mistake, you know, like it was strategic, even if I didn't realize at the time what I was creating, because I was just building something that I wanted to exist. And those are always the best businesses, you know? But what happened was, you know, all these people joined and suddenly they were like, oh my God, can I invite my friend, this person who's like this VP at this? I was like, hell yeah, yeah, like get them in here. But then it was like, you know what that looks like when people, you know, again, the dream, like people are inviting other people and it's like growing and whatever. And suddenly there were 1,000 people in this Slack meeting. They were looking to me for like, to like lead this thing. And I was like, I have a job. Like, I don't know who all of you are. I don't have time for this. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to make this $10 a month. Like, chill, $10 a month, like a cup and a half of coffee in New York, you know, but like enough where I feel like I'm being compensated for my time that I'm spending on this. And also a ton of people will leave. Like no one's going to stay. Who's going to stay if I charge them? Like this is like silly. And so I was like, great, I'm hoping like 50 people will stay and it'll be a cute little like thing. And so I made the announcement. I was really nervous because I didn't want anybody to be upset with me and, you know, whatever. And out of 1,000 people, like 500 stayed. And I was like, oh, you're all still here. But okay. Like, and then suddenly, again, having been raised in the environment that I was in, I was like, okay, this is like paying my rent all of a sudden. And I'm able to like go invest in software to make this even better. And like, you know, your brain starts going about all the things you can do. And I just genuinely also cared about the member. Like I cared about the people that were there and I wanted to like help them and create a space that they needed. And so it just grew from there. And I've never spent any money on marketing. I've never really felt the inclination to make it my full-time job or anything like that. It's really just this beautiful thing on the internet that I get compensated for the time that I spend on it. I also have a small team now, which is amazing. And I get to like pay younger women who like want to learn these skills and develop them to spend time on something that they love. And I've gotten to invest in software and like really do the job of having total control over an experience and over a product. And I love it. And it's a really amazing like sandbox for me too, where I experiment and I test out new things. And like, it feels like one giant psychology experiment to me, where like I've got now 2,000, actually, I think it's like 2,100 incredibly intelligent, driven women, non-binary people in one space. And I can just try things. I can just do things. I can just ask them questions.
Exactly.
I can just like put them in rooms together. I can invite them to stuff. And it just feels like this, like, it's so fun.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is like pure community-led growth that suddenly happened. And I'm wondering maybe if we reverse engineer what just happened till that moment when you ask them to pay, what synergy or what magic already happened between these people that they decided to stay, that they decided to pay you? Because for me, it's still like GrowthMate sounds like a community. Disclaimer, there is no community. There is no Slack group yet, because I'm scared. I'm really scared of what you have done. I'm really scared that I will open the doors, people will come, I will not be able to moderate, to facilitate, to do my job. I'm also caring about user experience too much. This is why I'm not doing that. But you have done that and you've seen that probably some synergy happened naturally between these people. But if you recall what happened that led them to stay, what was that? Was it something they uncovered or was it something you helped them to uncover in that community?
Yeah, I think it was a couple of things. I think that the first piece was that I identified a pure white space that I knew existed because I had it. Like I was the customer and I found myself being like, oh, I wish I had this thing. And it was at a time where communities were not like this was, again, 2021. It seems like it was like, I mean, it's not that long ago, right? I launched this. I started charging for this 3 years ago. So 3 years doesn't seem like a long time. But 3 years ago, there were not that many online communities. Like it was not really, or not of this type. Like obviously there have always been online communities in different spaces and forums and things like that, but not in the way that we have them today. And so part of it was really good timing in that I showed up in a way that I was like, oh, I see this confluence of like we're all getting more comfortable interacting virtually. We're getting more comfortable with Zoom. And like how cool that we can all start like connecting across cities and things like that. And also, there is this like subset of people, senior women. At that time, I was focused on senior women in tech and VC because that was what I knew. But I quickly sort of expanded into like senior women that were working in male dominated fields, which is most fields, but some more than others. But the reason I use that language is because so many women talk about being in male dominated fields and the challenges that come with that, just in terms of not having a lot of other women around the more senior you get. And so it was a lived experience that I could speak to. I think there is an element of founder-led sales and founder-led growth here where I was someone who I had no following at the time at all. And, my following is like small, but much bigger now than it was then. So it wasn't like I went out and like blasted it out on LinkedIn or anything like that. It was pure, I was meeting these people and then they were going to other people like us and saying, hey, I met this person. She's like us. And she's creating this space for us. And that is a really powerful coupling when they can identify with the person who's creating it, because it makes it feel much more human. I think one of the real challenges, and we can talk about this with my work at Mercury, it's very hard to build a community as a brand versus as a human. Because people understand humans and they want to hang out with humans and they understand their motivations and things like that, whereas brands are much more elusive and scary.
Interesting. Definitely want to talk about this one. Maybe we will smoothly get to that. But before that, I think some of people who are listening to us are wondering what is community-led growth. Maybe we can explain that first. What do you think it is and what it is not?
Yeah. Well, quick plug. I have a free lightning lesson coming up on Maven on this
Cool.
in a couple of weeks. But community-led growth, in my opinion, and it's still such a squishy word. I think community in general is a very weird term right now, particularly coming out of sort of like the Web3 NFT era. Community got a little bit of a bad rap for a bit. And I think a lot of people had bad experiences in communities. And so I always like to kind of like give context around. So I like this question. For me, community-led growth really is word of mouth. It really is about people finding a thing or a space or an offering or a person or whatever it is that they like so much that they can't help but tell other people about it. And not in like a weird formal, I'm going to get paid if I get people to sign up for this kind of way. But in like I just went to drinks with my friends and I was like so excited to tell them about this thing that I'm using or that I'm trying or that I like saw or whatever it is. Same thing as when you see a great movie or you read an awesome book or you like discover some new designer or something, like you just want to talk about it. And so that is community-led growth to me. It's when you are creating something that a group of people are so excited about that they inevitably want to bring other people in. It doesn't look that different than product-led growth, if I'm being honest. Like my background is in product, and a lot of times people are like, why did you move from product to community? And I'm like, it's the same thing. Like we're just using different words. It's really just a different growth lever. And so much of product-led growth is just harnessing community-led growth in a feature or in a user experience. And so they're really one and the same. So a lot of the language I use probably sounds very familiar to a lot of the people that are listening. What it's not, I think paid referral programs or like rewards-based referral programs, that is a growth tactic, but I don't put it into this bucket. It is not a sales funnel that is disguised as a community. You see this with brands a lot where they're like, come join our community. And then immediately they're like, have you thought about opening an account? And you're like, what? Why am I here? That is not community-led growth. That is a sales funnel. And so really it requires a really deep understanding and empathy for your users or your ICP in general, and being able to create something that they are so excited to talk about. That is like as much art as it is science, in my opinion. And it's one of the reasons I love this field is because it's so much about the humans that are using the thing versus I love data as much as the next person, but I just don't think it tells you everything. There are so many other creative ways to enrich your users' lives that don't show up in the data. And you do have to kind of step away and be like, if I was talking to my user in a coffee shop, like what would they want to hear? What would they be looking for? And I really try to pull people out to those real world hypotheticals in order to then go back into the product or the digital experience and be like, how can we recreate that feeling or that emotion or that interaction or whatever it is.
From what you are saying, like several things resonate a lot. Like it's about humans, it's about creating something and also creating a space where people can create things and share these things. It reminds me about my experience of creating Miraverse at Mira, which is like also community-led growth plus user-generated content.
Yeah.
It reminds me about Notion templates and also creating a
Notion's
marketplace.
the goat
Oh
on
my
this.
God, so they can monetize that content in its incredible growth loop. But what I want to talk about, what you've mentioned earlier, that it's harder to create and promote brands for communities versus founder-led or one-person-led communities. Can you tell more about that? Because it's interesting, even when I start thinking about potential growth mates community and how I create the awareness around growth mates, I create a lot of awareness through my personal brand as well. Probably you are doing same for the Old Girls Club. However, it has a brand, it has its name, it has its like identity, but it's super different probably for a big corporation like Mercury. Can you tell about all of that in a nutshell? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the brand to individual relationship that like you and I have to our personal brands, but like our business brands as well, is so different because it's a one-to-one, like, oh, Mallory made the Old Girls Club. And so inevitably the values that Mallory has or the ethos or whatever it is going to be reflected in that brand. I think with these large companies, like Mercury is 800 people, 850 people. There is like, is it going to reflect the founder? Is it a mods community? Is it Mallory's community? Is it someone on Mallory's team's community? Is it like because people really want to associate a human with a space that they are, sort of working in. And so one answer or like one option for brands is to find a human who is ideally going to be at the company for a very long time. Often the founder is a really good option. Or somebody who is like signing up to lead this kind of like motion for the foreseeable future to do a little bit of more of that sort of human-led messaging and like founder or like leader-led growth. That's one option, but it's not always doable, right? Like if community-led growth is a subset of your marketing strategy and like you're part of a broader marketing team and it's this like one goal that's kind of over here, kind of difficult to make that happen. And so the second way I think that brands can do it is if you can't put a human being in front of it, you can make it feel as human as possible. Where, again, I love the coffee shop example where it's like, all right, say somebody joins your brand community and you send them that onboarding message. Would that onboarding message make sense coming out of your mouth at a coffee shop? Or are you saying like really weird stuff for the first time you're meeting somebody? So like if somebody's like, hey, welcome to the community. Like, here's all the things you can do. And also you should open an account. And also like, here's this like referral code. Like if you said all of that to me in the first 2 minutes of meeting me at a coffee shop, that would be crazy. Like I would not be comfortable. And so I really encourage people as they're building onboarding experiences and thinking about why people are being in the community and how they're going to use it and who they're going to be interacting with and why and how and all of that, like those experiences should translate into your daily life or like translate into real, not virtual life. And another example is like, all right, you can't be naive about it, right? If it's a marketing strategy, you want to move them down the funnel at some point. Otherwise, why is the company investing in this strategy? Like if you're going to try to consult for somebody or something like that, like you build a relationship first, right? Like you create this sort of two-way street of like, hey, I'm doing these things for you. You're doing these things for me. I trust you. You trust me. Like we're talking about these things like humans. I understand that you might be like here for one reason or another. Like taking all of that into account, then it doesn't become weird if you're like, oh, hey, like, by the way, we have this thing. It might be useful to you for X, Y, or Z reason. Like, that's not weird. That's fine after a while, but you have to think about that stuff. So yeah, brands, I think, just have to be way more thoughtful and planned and like deliberate about all of those touch points with the users or potential users.
And brands should also feel like they should have humanity. They should feel
Absolutely.
not like a human, but they can feel like a human. It reminds me about my previous conversation with Lexi from Notion. And Notion is a brand that has humanity aspect. They have Notion faces. They have personality for their AI, and they're translating it a lot for their tone of voice and things like that. It creates more trust in general and more word of mouth as a side effect. However, another thing that just you reminded me about the fact that you were into psychology. It feels like you are trying to wear yourself in shoes of a user all the time when you're thinking about experiences, but also you're very in touch with this community of women who probably think differently about growing anything just by nature. And have you noticed any patterns like that, that when women is working or thinking about something, product-led growth, community-led growth, whatever growth, there is something different and unique in that thinking?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of, I don't like to paint broad strokes, but I do think that the group of people who are building things right now all grew up in a relatively traditional world where women, girls, young girls were taught to be kind and be thoughtful and like make sure that everyone around them was like okay. And, that's sort of the like value set that we were taught in the 90s as kids. And boys, I think, are raised to think quite a bit more about outcomes and progress and achievements and career and money and like all of that stuff. And so I think some of the ways that you see that reflected is women tend to, in their very first line of thinking or their very first line of sort of design, have a highly empathetic approach where they're like, okay, is everybody going to be comfy? Like, is everybody going to feel okay? Like, am I going to upset anybody? Is anybody going to, whatever? Whereas I think men in their first line of design often default to what is the result I want? And like, how do I move people from A to B? Both of those things are so important. Like, one is not more important than the other. And I think the people that do it really well blend both. And I think sometimes it's a challenge for women to be brave enough and to be daring enough and to be audacious enough to charge for the thing that they're doing or excel themselves to somebody or try to convince somebody of something. And then I think sometimes it's a challenge, or men need to be more thoughtful about putting themselves in people different from them's shoes and thinking about, okay, well, this is a working mom who I'm trying to sell to. Like, she might not want to hop on a call at 5 p.m. because she's going to be feeding her kid, or she has errands to run, or whatever it is. And so I think that, like, when I was designing the Old Girls Club, I designed it very much from a place of synchronous things can't be a part of, like, the core part of this, because working women's schedules are crazy. Like, there's having them show up to a thing at a time that's not their like top priority because this is just a community. It's not their day job. Like, impossible.
Absolutely.
Like, how am I ever, like, that makes no sense. And so I think it's those things where just the prioritization throughout design, I think we can always do a better job of prioritizing that user experience and the empathy and understanding the different personas. But we can always do a better job of, like, making sure people know what to do and how to move through the funnel, and like, we're valuing our product in the right way. And so we can all get better at all that stuff, I think.
It's about the synergy and like balance of both elements, like empathy part. And, I will bring probably very out of the topic comparison, but I'm into analytical psychology, and I'm for more than 4 years in Jungian psychology. And there is a concept of anima and animus. Anima is more like feminine aspect of psychology, or the mind. And animus is a more like masculine type of like mentality. And there should be both found in any human being, women, men,
absolutely.
It doesn't matter. And it's about this balance as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the one thing I always tell people is just like, don't make it weird. Just don't make it weird. Like, as you're thinking about how you're moving people through, just make sure it's not weird. It's like, move people towards your goals, but don't do it in a weird, uncomfy way. Like, don't make people uncomfortable, because you'll lose them forever immediately. And that's maybe the one last point I'll make about building community, is that as soon as you make somebody feel weird or like uncomfortable or unsure, they're gone. Like, that's it. And so you're so much better off overthinking that to a degree where, like, you're really listening and you're paying attention as people are leaving and you're asking them why they left, or like you're really trying to pivot as you go, because you can't always read people's minds, right? And you can't predict the future. And so like people are going to feel weird about things that you don't mean to make them feel weird about. And then you change it. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect out of the gate, but that is the thing that I would say that people need to really pay the most attention to if CLG is sort of their goal.
Yeah, that's a great summary about the community topic. And I think as we don't have a lot of time, I would love to talk more and more, of course. But this conversation was amazing and also touched a lot of parts about the career. And we talked about different parts of your career, like as a founder, as a person in a big corporation, and all these transformations. And now you're combining and blending them all. You're like an advisor, you're a full-time person, you're also a teacher. And how do you define successful career today? What does it mean to you?
Success has always, or my goals in my career have always been around creating a life that I love. And I'm a very particular person. Like I like certain ways of living. I'm actually quite introverted. I really like to have like a beautiful, comfortable home. I really like to have time to myself. I can't be on meetings all day because it just absolutely destroys me. And so a lot of my goals are to create a mix of activities and events and responsibilities and outputs and things like that that feel like me and that feel like, man, I am excited to get up in the morning and like I'm energized throughout the day, and then I can like rest and enjoy my husband and like our house at night. And so it's always about finding the things to me that match my values and the things that I care about, spending time on those things, designing my sort of time spent in a way that facilitates the life that I want to be able to live, while still pushing myself to create kind of that maximum positive impact. So like teaching is a wonderful way to do that, because it's, you know, sort of minimal, like I can really schedule it. I'm locked in for that period of time when I'm teaching, but then there's like a really big impact that comes from that. Or writing is another version of that. Whereas my full-time job, I get to like learn from smart people and like work on cool projects. And I like showing up to the same familiar place every day. And then OGC allows me to experiment and like be on my own time. And like if I want to work on the weekend, I have something that I can work on without like annoying the people at my W-2 job, you know? And so it's about, I think, just crafting that life. And I think people don't always realize they have the power to do that. Like you can just decide to do certain things that are exciting to you. I'm taking a ceramics class this month because I like want to make some bowls, you know, like you can just do that stuff. It's really fun. And so yeah,
it looks like you have a lot of energy to do all of that stuff. And it's like you're generating it somewhere. I don't know if you have a generator machine in your home.
I am an avid sleeper and I don't have any kids. I think that like people, that's what I get a lot is like, how do you do it all? A lot of my ability to do this is that I am like lucky to have the flexibility to have waited to decide to have children until now. And I don't, working moms, I have so much, I have no idea where they find the energy. I just don't, you know, my French bulldog doesn't require very much. And so that's also been part of my career planning is like, I know that if and when I do decide to have kids, that will change the split of time that I have. And so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That is one of the themes I'm also like super curious about and hope to bring a person on this podcast who can tell us how to do that. We have had already Elena Werner, who has 2 kids. So
yeah.
She told some secrets. Feel free to listen to that episode. But one line from your current LinkedIn that I couldn't skip, that actually caught my eye, was that you're somehow connected to the New Museum of Contemporary Art, or you're somehow helping them. It sounds like a dream for me to have such a line on my resume or CV someday. What is that? What are you doing there? And does it help you, like the connection to art or to craft helps you get some energy to do the stuff you're doing?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. My mom did a ton of art when I was growing up. She was a retired nurse, but she was a visual arts major in college. So she always had me, we were always doing crafts and painting and taking photos, and we were in the dark room together. We were doing all these things, and it was awesome. And so I've always loved art. And I loved it even more after studying psychology and expression. And I just love it. And I wish I got to spend more time with artists and with creatives. And so that was actually something that I really deliberately was like, I want to get involved in the art community somehow. And a friend of mine was on the board of New Inc., which is the organization that I'm on the advisory board for. And they are a sort of associated they're a nonprofit that are part of the new museum in New York, and it's an accelerator. It's a place where these artists come in that they want to learn how to build a business around their art, and so it was this like really cool blend of the things that I loved. And the new museum, I love that it's local. I love that it's here in New York. It's a beautiful museum. They're reopening this year after a bunch of construction. And so, I deliberately went to this person who I knew in my life, and he was very connected to the art world. He's a collector, but he also is a VC. And so I was like, all right, he gets it. He knows how to blend these things. Hopefully he can help me figure it out. And he did. He was like, oh my God, we have a board seat set opening up. Like, do you want to come talk to them? And so I would just say, like, for people who want to start blending worlds like that, try to find other people who have done it and just ask them. Like, I think people are so passionate about talking about those things because it's so cool and like they're very fulfilling. And if I had never asked him, I wouldn't be helping with it. So,
and it's also reminding us about following your interests. At least this is something I'm writing about today on my newsletter. It's something I found from Jeff Koons, like the American artist, very popular. And yeah, just follow your interest. I think it will lead you somewhere, and probably it will be the right direction.
Yeah, I talk
Mallory,
a lot about like following the energy, and like I'm a little bit of like we need to bring a little more magic into our lives person, and so when you feel energized, like do more of that thing.
Exactly. Probably the energy is where is your interest as well. It's somewhere.
Absolutely.
Like in the
it all
similar
gets easier when
spot.
you're doing stuff you like.
Super. Mallory, thank you so much for being with me today. I really love this conversation. I probably will ask you back about some stuff. I don't know. So many things, so many questions left. Anything you'd like to say? Any intentions about your next steps? Any updates we need to know about your amazing things you are creating for all of us?
No, I mean, I think I'm very easy to find on the internet, but would love to see folks in my Maven class that's coming up. And then LinkedIn is kind of I write a decent amount on LinkedIn, so that's kind of an easy way. And then if anybody here is a woman working in a male-dominated field that is in, a senior role, I would love to see you in OGC as well. And all of that is where our SEO is good, so you'll find us. Don't worry.
Of course, and we will attach all the links to this episode description.
Great.
So thank you, Mallory, for being with me today. Thanks everyone who watched or listened to this conversation. If you found this valuable, share it with someone. Why not? And please tell what you think in the on the platform where you are watching this or listening this. So thank you, Mallory.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.